Hello dear World of Warcraft friends, welcome back to a new video on my channel. About 2 weeks or a week and a half ago, Blizzard announced patch 12.1. In my opinion, the whole thing looks pretty cool, but in many areas on the internet, the community isn't speaking too well of Blizzard right now, and there are two reasons for that. First, the dungeon pool of Season 2 of World of Warcraft Midnight, and on the other hand, many people are currently accusing Blizzard that they're actually getting worse every year and pretending to offer improvements that really aren't, because all of this has happened many times before. What this video is about, I'll show you in this video. Important, I've heard your feedback. I will mostly hold back my own opinion on these points. I'm just delivering the message to you. What you do with it is up to you. Form your own opinion. I don't want to force my opinion on anyone here. I'll try to put that into practice in the future or make an even bigger effort to do so. I hope you appreciate that. And if you want to support me sitting in front of my PC at 34 degrees in my apartment after a long day at work, still recording videos for you, I would really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. Even if some people don't want to admit it, this whole thing is still several hours of work every day. I put my heart and soul into this, and I would really appreciate your support. So every like, every subscription helps, every comment, let's go for it. Let's start with something that honestly I didn't have on my radar at all. I picked up the whole thing in a short video and even talked about it very positively. It's about this topic here. So at the end of the video, they themselves told us that there would be improvements for the interface. And for accessibility, so for making things more accessible, and it was already mentioned that they want to make abilities more visible. And that's exactly what Blizzard has now released a blog post about. And Wowhead has also published an article about it, or rather has reposted Blizzard's blog post. And in the end, one of the players' criticisms was that some mechanics are really hard to see. And accordingly, Blizzard decided, for example, here you can see a frontal mechanic from the new dungeon. And now there are clear edges and lines that show where this effect ends. In the past, it was more like this. The whole thing down here was kind of milky green, but without these clear outlines. And a lot of players said, hey, I don't know where the frontal starts or ends. That's why Blizzard implemented it. In my opinion, honestly, that's a good thing. Here we can also see it in King's Rest. They implemented it there as well. And then here are some more examples for other abilities. This isn't exactly a frontal. It may look like it, but that's because during testing, the player was alone in the dungeon. That means the boss couldn't target any other player. Here we're talking about abilities where a boss or a trash mob marches toward the player in a straight line. Here too, this line is now clearly highlighted and separated by these jagged lines on the sides. And here we see the whole thing again, for example, how it looks with a trash mob. This is one of the mobs on the way to the third boss. After this, in King's Rest, comes the bridge. Then down there is the third boss, and to the right is the way to the fourth. And here we can also see that this charge mechanic is marked with this. And as I said, I mentioned in the video, or in a short video, that I find this change very, very positive. Because in the end, anything that promises better visibility I think is pretty cool, because it helps you, and especially me. I've noticed myself lately that in all the chaos, especially with blue on red and so on, I honestly have a bit of trouble now. The Aberrus raid was really bad for me. There were a lot of things I didn't see because they all kind of had this red-orange shimmer. That's why I think it's very positive. Many players have pointed out in the comments that this was already something Blizzard improved earlier. And that was something I didn't have on my radar anymore. But from the war within Season 2 to Season 3, Blizzard had already announced that AoEs and ground effects should be more visible. And accordingly, that's the big point of criticism that's often brought up here on Reddit and also in the WoW forum. The question being raised is, why did Blizzard take a step back, selling these improvements that they already had in the game as a new feature now? They were even compared to CD Projekt Red here. Again, I'm not familiar with that. I've honestly never played The Witcher. But even there, people said, look at this. Year 2020, The WoW team made ground effects and frontals more visible. Yes, year 2022. The WoW team made ground effects and frontals more visible, and so on and so forth. Accordingly, yeah, that's why Blizzard is being memed a lot right now. Personally, I didn't find it that bad. Honestly, I didn't even remember that there were already these improvements in the War Within. Maybe I just didn't notice it because I was usually actually satisfied with it. And apart from that, we also had a really big post about the design philosophy of the second season Mythic Dungeons. The feedback from the players regarding the dungeons was extremely bad. So, not referring to the new Midnight Dungeons, but Ruby Life Pools wasn't well received. King's Row, King's Rest wasn't well received either. And there was especially a lot of criticism in the forums this time, and Blizzard also commented on it. A lot of players said, hey, Pit of Sarin was really awesome. Why don't you bring back a Wrath of the Lich King dungeon again? Blizzard says that they first look at which returning dungeons would fit into the season, for example. Something like Lura, now from the seat of the Triumvirate, in the past season or in the current season. Yeah. That's something they actually try to pay attention to. Other than that, they also say that they want to rework the dungeons for a new season and incorporate feedback from previous expansions to improve the player experience in these dungeons. Every dungeon gets a complete review, so they look at every mob regarding HP, abilities, and so on and so forth. And whether the dungeon is too challenging, too easy, and so on and so forth. They were very, very satisfied with Season 1 and want the Season 2 dungeons to feel about the same in terms of difficulty. And in the end, there are also some further changes here, like this improved visibility. They have already announced a few changes for the individual dungeons. But all in all, yeah. The players' response to this statement was actually, okay, but originally, people were actually not satisfied with the dungeon selection. Testing for the dungeons has now started on the PTR, so I think we'll get a bit more feedback there. But yes, those are two major points of criticism that are currently circulating in the community. What do you think about it? Feel free to write it in the comments, and with that, thanks for watching. See you in the next video, have a great time, and take care.